Well, I want to welcome you to this afternoon's presentation of tips and tactics from the CVC Success Group. And I got two great people joining me today, and they're experts in the subject matter that we're going to talk about. So, Cheryl, let's tell them a little bit, start with you. What makes you an expert in the hiring and interviewing process?
Basically, I've done it all my life. I've been self-employed for 4 years, and I haven't, let's put it that way. So I've hired basically all my life, but 24 years. And after seeing how bad it was just doing it for yourself, I began to try to get better at it, doing it for other people. And so that's where I've got with. Since I'm a certified Ziegler trainer, and I've been there. That's really helped because I can come at it from a more cultural background than just a generic background.
Got you covered. So you've done this, but you've also been through a lot of training in how to do this through the DISC assessment and those type of things that we're going to talk a little bit about today. So the other presenters, one of the members of our team here, Brandy Biswell, and she runs a business in Kansas City and also works as our team as one of our coaches and our trainers here, and probably one of the leading experts in the chimney service industry on hiring, onboarding, assessing, those type of things. So Brandy, what makes you this super person to be on this call?
I think kind of like Cheryl, years and years of doing it. I do have a master's degree in administration, so I had some classes there. And then I've just taken classes over the years, done self-study, just trying to refine the process of hiring and onboarding and make it the best that it can be.
And one of the things that you also do is you still, just like Cheryl, you go to a lot of classes on the human resources side. In fact, when we look at our team, you're the person I go to when it becomes, human resources. You're that person there. And you do this because you go to a lot of classes year round. Am I right?
Yes, and I am a member of the Society for Human Resources, or SHRM for short. And so that gives me a lot of extra resources, people I can bounce ideas off. We have a forum where you can hear what the other companies are struggling with and give advice. So it's very, very nice.
Okay, so these two ladies, I'm going to be asking them a couple questions today. And one of the things is, if you're participating in this, if you'd like to ask a question or add a comment, simply type it into the comment bar. You need to register your name with StreamYard, which is on the invitation you saw. That way we can see your name and you'll come through okay. But we'd like to, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in. We'd love to have them. So the first thing is, today, probably this is the leading frustration for many business owners and managers today. Brandy, would you agree with that?
It's always has been, it's always going to be. COVID did not help.
Right. So Cheryl, what you do is, and a lot of people may not understand this, is you hire for other companies. In other words, they contract with you to do initial interviews and assessments and referring to people. How frustrated do you find that your clients are when they say, Cheryl, what's it cost for you to just do this for me?
At that point, they're on their last notch. They're ready to throw in the towel. I've even had them say, I refuse to hire another employee because it's tedious. It's time consuming. The people don't realize until they get into it that it almost takes a full-time person just doing hiring and onboarding.
Yeah. And Brandy, that's one of the questions I asked you one time, that in your business there at Blues Brothers in Kansas City, how much of your time today is spent in the human resources side? And this is both in the hiring, the interviewing, the onboarding, what percentage of your time do you dedicate into that now?
80 to 90%. It's my most time consuming.
That's what I mean. So you're almost a full-time human resource person for Blues Brothers.
Correct.
Okay. So you're also the person that would, shall we say, if you have a problem employee, are you the person that also deals with that problem employee, possibly sending them home from work, or if they violated the rules, is that part of what you have?
Sent one home today.
So that's one of the things about this. So, Brandy's a very strict person, and she has her rules and her regulations, and she expects everybody to abide by those. And she does make them abide by the rules. So one of the things that goes on out here we see today is what I'm going to call desperation hiring. In other words, people are hiring anybody that can walk and talk. Randy, do you see that in the industry?
I see it over and over again, and desperation hiring will never be successful.
Yeah. Cheryl, have you ever had clients that just told you, hey, forget about their qualifications, just get me a body? Do people actually tell you that?
I've even had them say, breathing's optional as long as they can stand straight up.
Okay, so desperation hiring, because I think what happens here is that people are not willing to invest the time into the processes, and they're hiring people. And what happens from here is we have a lot of employee failures. In fact, Brandy, when you were talking and we put together our year-end self-analysis form for our clients, one of the questions you wanted to ask that we put in was, is your turnover rate less than 10%? Now, why did you arrive at that 10% level?
It's just a metric I've seen over and over again, 10 to 11%. You want to be definitely under that, or you need to be looking at your processes and seeing why you do have such high turnover. It costs so much to hire employees. And so we want to retain those great employees for as long as we can. And when you're constantly turning them over, not only is it bad for business, it's bad for the bottom line.
Yeah. So Cheryl, one of the problems people have is they have what I'm going to call ghosting. Someone applies for a job, and in your case, you've now set up a time frame to interview this person with a Zoom interview. Am I correct?
I do. I interview them before the client gets to them. At least if they're going to ghost, they have to ghost me.
Okay.
And many times people will go through the process and never show up. And if they don't show up for me, they're not going to show up for the employee. And then on the other hand, a lot of times they go through my interview, but never show up when the customer's interview set up.
So how do you deal with that ghosting frustration?
Well, I don't have anybody to choke. So basically just have to move on with it. If they're a very, very good candidate, every now and then I will send out an email just verifying whether they might have been in something wrong or whatever. But as a general rule, if they can't show up for me, they're not going to show up at work.
Okay, so you ladies know I just put a comment up from a gentleman by the name of Doug Wing. Now, neither one of you knows who Doug is, but I will tell you who he is. Doug's family is the inventor and the manufacturer for many years of the Little Giant ladder. So he is a manufacturer, and he's actually in some of the coaching groups. I mean, a real neat guy. But you can see, and Brandy, do you agree with what he's saying? We hire with attitude being the number one thing we look for.
Absolutely, because that attitude is what they're going to bring to work every day. It's what they're going to show your customers. It's how they're going to act when they're out in the field. Okay.
So you deal with ghosting also, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. So what percentage of people do you feel ghost you that have turned it, that makes you wonder, why did you even file for this? Why did you even apply?
Right. I would say pre-COVID, it was probably as high as 40%. Now, during COVID, I would say it's been a lot lower to maybe 20%.
Okay. So how do you keep yourself pumped up? Because this is one of the things that I know. We all participate in a lot of Facebook forums, and I see a lot of business owners, they're just throwing their hands up like, I got ghosted again, or this guy didn't show up for the interview. And this is what you deal with. Cheryl, what percentage do you think have that ghost you?
I agree with Brandy about right now, most people aren't looking for a job. In fact, the Indeed ads coming in have dropped quite a bit. The problem with the ones that have dropped, they're the people at the lower end that really, they maybe have just gotten out of school or whatever. But right now, as we see things changing again in the government, it's drawing back again. I don't know if Brandy sees that herself.
Yeah. Well, Brandy's had real good success in hiring. She has put on a lot of people. For some reason, I don't know if it's Brandy, I don't know if it's Kansas City, but Brandy, your market there in Kansas City has been pretty good at supplying you with new people. Am I correct?
It really has. COVID was actually a blessing for our hiring because we got a lot of people. I have one guy that was a restaurant manager. I have one guy that was at Toyota. And when they got laid off, either their job wasn't available for them to come back to, or a lot of the times the case was they just didn't want to wait and see and be on unemployment. They wanted to be out there working. And so they applied. So it was actually a blessing for our hiring process.
Okay. So you're seeing good things are happening from COVID as far as your hiring going up. So how, as you go through the ghosting, how do you keep you're a person with a lot of drive. How do you keep from getting discouraged?
Well, there's a couple of things. Jerry, years ago, I had a guy tell me, I called him, looked really good on paper. I called him to set up an interview, and he said, well, let's go ahead and set it up, but I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not going to show up. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I just need to say that I got so many interviews for unemployment. So thank you. Okay. Now, on one hand, I appreciated his honesty. On the other hand, I was like, he's not a very good person. So I know that there's that population out there that does that. I know that there's the population that they get another job offer and just don't have the courtesy to call you and say, hey, I've accepted another position. So I think it's just a part of what you deal with. Now, one of my tricks that I like to do, and usually if we're doing a big spring hire, we'll do this, is open interviews. So you take the ghosting part out of it. So basically, you go through all the applications, maybe wait a week, go through all of them, and then you have a day or two that you're doing open interviews, and you say, hey, we'd like to open interview you. We're open interviewing on this day from this time to this time. Would love to see you. And then that way, if they show up, great, and you interview them, and you can get through a lot quickly to see if there's somebody in there. And if they don't show up, it doesn't matter because you didn't know if they were going to show up or not.
Okay. So Cheryl, in your process, you are a certified DISC assessment analyzer coach. You're also a color code assessor and coach. So how important is this? Because let's tell everybody a little bit, what's the difference in DISC and color code, and how does this help you to determine if you have the right person?
Well, basically the difference, we'll start there. The difference, the DISC is based on how you are at this particular moment. After all your life changes and everything's done, it will always be the same, that you've been altered. You alter your day in, day out with what happens. In the color code analysis, it's based on your youngest memory as a child before you were, quote, tainted by the world. And so they usually show up very concise as to being to look on people, because a lot of people, they've changed, but their interior, their core is not. They're still answering a lot of the way as their child would be. But if you had an abusive childhood, or you had some big trauma, the color code will show a more definite core than the DISC will.
Okay, so Brandy, let's take it a little further. You took a DISC assessment after Cheryl got her certification. What did you learn about yourself from that DISC? Like, I learned from that DISC.
Well, it's quite scary looking at it because it validated all the things I knew inside, but I didn't know that a test knew about me. And I've actually had to get with Cheryl and dig down deep. I had 2 office people that I hired that were failures, and I never had office failures before. And I had to get with Cheryl and take a look at the DISC and see where did I mess up? Like what prompted me to hire these people and I shouldn't have. And what we kind of determined is I'm a very high D on the DISC. So I'm outspoken, I'm a leader, I'm assertive. And so I was being attracted to those other high D. Both of them were high D, and I was attracted to that because I'm a high D. And really for my office, what we determined is I need more of a mix of the S and C or the I and S rather than a D, because we've already got one D.
Yeah. And Cheryl, one of the things about the assessment, it tells us about the communication style, how to talk to a person, how not to talk to them, which I think that is a big factor in getting the right people where you can effectively communicate with them. Just like in sales, you got to be able to think like that customer. And with that situation, so tell people a little bit about the communications that you found and learned from this.
The basic thing that you learn is each of us have a different style, for a better word, that we like to be communicated in. Brandy and I, we like information in bullet points. Do it, get it over with. Let me move on. The answer are a lot of instruction. So unless you know that, Brandy and I would both tend to talk to everyone like we do, very blunt, very short. So as you learn how these people are, you know how to speak with them. And as everybody knows, communication is about 95% of what makes the world go right anyway.
Yeah. So does that help you to determine what Doug said? We always hire with attitude being the number one thing we look for. Does that help you to determine that attitude?
It does. The thing, and I agree with him totally. I can train anybody to do a project. If I've got the right tools, I can train them, but I cannot adjust their communication and their attitudes.
Okay.
So if I know how to understand them, then I know how to lead them.
Gotcha. So Brandy, in the interview process, how many interviews do you do before you actually hire someone and put them onto the payroll?
So we have a pretty lengthy, I guess, vetting process, I would say. So first thing, obviously we're looking over their resume. If we're kind of interested, we'll give them a phone interview. Depending on how that goes, they'll get an in-person interview. Depending on how that goes, they will get to shadow for a day. If all of that goes well, then we will hire them.
Okay. So various processes. So what you're going through, let me ask you this. Tell me how much leniency you have for a person that is late for that face-to-face interview.
So, and I'm going to speak of the shadow because this is why we have so many steps. For example, I've interviewed somebody, they were on time for that face-to-face interview, and then they were late for a shadow. How lenient am I? 0. Now I prep them at the person-to-person interview. I give them instructions on their shadow day. It says on there, absolutely do not be late or you will not be shadowing. And I've had them show up a minute late. And I just explained to them, I'm sorry, but you're not going to be a great fit for our company. One of our core values is being on time. We have a train that goes by our shop. And so a lot of people will try to use the excuse of the train. And I tell them, plan for the train.
Yeah. So Cheryl, right now, one of your clients that you hire for just came on, and that's Lee Rolfe, who you do his hiring for him in his interview process. So Cheryl, tell me in the interview process, what are you asking people? Tell me a couple interview questions you would ask that help you determine.
The very first question I ask is not a question, is a comment. Tell me about yourself. That gives them a chance to get a conversation started. It also gives them a chance to tell me some things I can't ask in the interview. There's a lot of questions that I can't ask. I always ask them about their last job. What did they like about it? What did they not like about it? I'll ask them, tell me about something that went good and what made it go right. And then I'll also tell me something that went bad. What happened? And the answer I'm looking for is, what did you learn from it?
Okay. So you're primarily asking questions about them instead of telling them what you're looking for. Am I correct?
I never really tell them what I'm looking for. I'll ask at the very end, are there any questions that you might like to ask of me that I may or may not be able to answer? Again, you've got to remember, I'm hiring for a client, and I might not know their exact details at the money. I don't talk money during my first interview. That gives my client a chance. If he needs to adjust his level, then he can without being too said.
Okay. So your process, as I understand it, is you get the applicants come to you. You filter through the applicants for the client and then you select who you feel will make the right person from the application. Am I correct?
Correct.
And then you do a Zoom face-to-face, just like we're doing now, where you can see them, you can see eye contact, see what they're doing, those type of things. And are you recording that interview with that prospect?
I do record it. I record it for two reasons, but with their knowledge, I record it so I'm sure I've got everything correct. I want them to be as confident as me. If I need to go back and do something, you remember I can do as many as 15 to 20 of these a day. Memory does not work that long. So there's many times before I will send it to my client, I'll go back and re-listen to the interview to make sure I've actually got the right person in mind before I send it to them. It's
Okay.
just like I just can't do it after every interview. So some days I can't get it to the client till the end of the day.
Okay. So is there times that you do a joint interview, such as you're attending the live interview in their office where the client might be interviewing the prospect face to face, but you're actually there on a Zoom call watching and asking questions and those type of things. Am I correct?
I'm more watching than asking. As a rule, the person that we interviewed would not know that my client has seen their interview with me. This opens it up for the client to ask them some of the same questions that I've processed to them, seeing if they'll answer us both the same way. During that particular interview, I'm looking more for body language, more for eye contact, more for responsiveness, things that the client may not be able to keep his eyes on while he's trying to get the knowledge.
Got you covered. So that's all good processes and things that go on. Now, are you also in this process, do you feel like you're training your client in how to do face-to-face interviews? And you're smiling really big right now.
Yeah, I do. The thing is, it also gives me the chance to talk to the client after the interview and tell him never interrupt him in his own interview. But it gives me a chance to say, you need to back off on this a little bit. You need to do this a little more. You're asking the wrong questions, actually. And also, a lot of times with a brand new client, I'll do their first full interview with them sitting in with me.
Okay. So Brandy, I'm gonna go over you. What's the questions that you ask that give you that right information? Just like Doug said, that's what we're looking for. That right attitude, that yes attitude. What are you asking them to determine that?
Yeah, so I always ask who was their favorite boss and why. Who was their least favorite boss and why? That can tell you a lot. I always ask them about an ethical dilemma they've faced in a previous job. Tell me about it and how they handled it. 3 strengths, 3 weaknesses. I have a whole list of others. One of the things I wanted to hit on, though, is that Cheryl brought up that was very important when she starts the interview with "Tell me about yourself," is there are so many questions that legally we can't ask. However, for every illegal question, there's a legal way to get around it. So, for example, if you're wanting to know that they can't work on Sundays because they go to church, you can say the hours are Monday through Sunday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Can you work those hours? But I can't ask if they can work Sunday or if they have off Sunday for church.
Right.
So there's usually a legal way to get around that and answer that. And keep in mind that not everybody is a great interview. I have some wonderful, wonderful employees working for me who didn't interview the best. They were just nervous. But you can typically pick up on that and just give them the right words to make them feel more at ease. You can see that their attitude's great. They have a great handshake. At the same time, you can have people that interview very, very well, but are not going to make a great employee. At the end of the day, I always say, go with that gut feeling.
Okay. So Cheryl, let me ask you this. You interview all over the country. And at this point, most people have probably determined that you and I speak with somewhat of a Southern accent. So when you're interviewing someone, we'll say from New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, that definitely has a different dialect, what kind of questions do they ask you since you're interviewing them remotely and you're not even in the same state?
I tell them that right up front. I tell them where I'm from and why I'm doing it. And if you want the best thing that I get 90% of the time is, I love your accent. And they all know somebody from North Carolina, which makes it really good because then we can chit chat. You've got to remember, I'm not in an office setting, so I've become someone that can talk with them and about them. So I just let them talk and tell me about their friends in North Carolina. And we've actually had some that lived right up the road here. So it's been really interesting. You'd be surprised. It's easier to interview someone above the Mason-Dixon than below.
Okay. At this point in conversation, you're getting so good at behavior analysis and deciding what they are, but without an actual assessment. Do you find that at the end of that conversation, you can pretty well predict where they'll come on a DISC assessment?
Usually within a couple points.
Really? So you can tell from this. And Brandy, I think you've probably developing that same skill after you had your own DISC done and some of your people to understand these things. Would that be true?
To a degree. Before I have Cheryl DISC assess somebody, I'll try to guess what they are. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes not. She's definitely the expert in that department, but it's invaluable, that test.
Okay. So I'm going to, yes.
One more thing before you go any farther. Once you get good at DISC, you can tell what they are via a phone conversation.
Okay. So I'm going to step this up to, I'm going to call it a higher level interview process. Now, at this point, we basically have been talking about hiring someone for your office, a technician in the field, a warehouse guy. But let's move this up to the next level, which is we're hiring for a general manager. And so you listeners know, often all three of us participate along with a client in a Zoom call. Now, so you know, Brandy takes the lead. Brandy is the best. We sit back and watch. They don't let me talk to the last because they say I scare people. But anyway, so Brandy, if we're talking about this high level hire, someone that's going, let's take you and Jeremy. You're going to hire a general manager to take over Flues Brothers. What are you looking for in this person? Because more than likely, they're not going to have industry experience. Am I correct?
Correct. Nobody comes to chimney sweeping with industry experience typically.
Right.
So it's a very, very different type of an interview. Number one, I expect them to show up professionally dressed with a copy of the resume in hand. But from there, we're asking very different questions. We want to know about their past job experience and how they did in that job. We will purposely throw in some acronyms like KPI, ROI, and see if they know what that means and see if they can tell us about that at their previous job. We will ask them to tell us about a situation where they had to fire an employee, for example, and how that went, or where they just had to have a strict talking with an employee and tell us about that. So we're really more assessing for, are they going to be able to keep our business in line, keep our revenue where we want it to be, manage the employees. It's a very, very different interview.
Yeah. Cheryl, whenever we've done, and again, I'm going to call it a high level interview. This may go on for several hours. Sometimes they last less than 5 minutes also. So you'll know, we can tell from Brandy's question. If Brandy does 3 questions, he said, I'm done. We all know this one is not to meet our standards at all. Right? Like he's out of here. She's out of here. So what would you share about a high level type interview? And to be honest with you, each of us brings something to that type of interview. When you look at this, like I said, I'm asking certain questions. You're asking certain questions. We're trying to feel this person out. We're going to entrust this person with our company. So we've got to dig really deep. This is one of the worst positions you can have a hiring failure in. So what's your impression of our high level interview processes?
I'd hate to sit through it myself. Let's put it that way. If you can pass this interview, you've got a fairly good chance at making it. But we all, like you say, we all come from different aspects. And Brandy's feeding them a lot of questions you and I would ask them also. So we let her get those out. While she's doing that, that gives me a chance to, again, watch the body language, watch the eyes, watch whether they're bored. I mean, if you're going to get bored in the interview, I'll knit you out at the end of the game. Okay. And if I don't ask any questions, y'all know that it's over with. If I pass, we're done, because I'm going to hit on some cultural questions. Not many, because you've got to remember, I've already interviewed this person.
Okay. So go back. What's a red flag? Brandy, what's a red flag interviewee when when you're interviewing, what's the
Oh
red
gosh.
flag say it's time to end this right now?
Your memory's better than mine. I know we've had quite a few that I've ended pretty quickly. Obviously, if they don't have confidence, and if they're not answering our questions with any level of knowledge, or it seems like they have never been in even a mid-level management position. The expectations, that's a huge red flag. If we go over the expectations and theirs are different, that's really, really important for that high level interview. So, we're telling them this is not a 9 to 5 job. This is a 6 a.m. to midnight job if we need it. And we're telling them that, as you're integrating with the culture, you need to get up on the roof with those guys, and you need to help them and learn them, and have them get to bond with you. And if they're not down for those things, or they say, I need off by a certain time, that's fine. It's just, this is not the right position for them.
Okay. Cheryl, what about you? What's the red flags that jump out at you?
When they cross their arms and lean back in their chair, when they roll their eyes.
You're talking about like this?
You got it.
Okay.
When they roll their eyes, when they start avoiding questions is the first thing. My questions are more to hear what they don't say than what they do say. I want them to verbalize stuff. And if there's questions they just don't answer, that catches my attention more.
Yeah, that's it. So anything you ladies would add into this that people could take out of here with value?
I think just definitely, like going back to the very beginning, do not hire out of desperation. Remembering that it does take up a huge amount of time. You have to remember, if you can't look at that resume day one and contact them day 1 or 2, they're already gone. So you've got to have somebody that can dedicate the time to that. If you can't, then I highly, highly recommend hiring Cheryl, because that's what she's there for. She's there for the offices that don't have someone that can invest that type of time.
Okay. What about you, Cheryl? What would you add into this?
Just take your time. Hire, what's the old thing? Hire slow, fire fast, instead of the opposite. My thing to say most is, instead of hiring, don't be afraid to fire them.
Okay.
That's, to me, more important than the hiring sometimes.
So sometimes we're too fast to hire and we're too slow to fire. Would that be true? Okay, so folks, here's the whole thing. If you need help in hiring people, if you need help in recruiting them, you need help in the interview process. This can be from training you in how to do it, or in contracting with someone to do it for you. Reach out to these two ladies. They can help you guide through it. They can help you develop what Brandy works with is office processes. She can help you put together your systems and those kind of things for that. Cheryl works from her aspect. So what we've done here, we try to have subject matter experts to help people. Also, this is something else to make you aware of. This is a book that I recently released. It is called Step Up to Success. Now, Brandy, you've read through this book. How sound are the principles?
They are very sound. I think that everybody, and not just in our industry, needs to have a copy of this book, because it really goes through the processes to make someone successful when they're in the job.
That's it. So I've worked on this. This contains Brandy's processes, Cheryl's, my own. This is a lot of years of stuff here. It's not a bad read. And so, Brandy, you haven't, I don't know if you've got the printed copy yet, so to just come out, but this is actually a workbook. So what you've got here is every chapter is summarized, and it enables you to put this together into a workbook form. So Lee Rolfe just posted up there. Cheryl has saved us a ton of time and got us some really good people. That's a testimonial, folks, because I know Lee was talking to me yesterday, and he said, I need to talk to Cheryl, and got it set it up to do something. Lee didn't call Cheryl. She was waiting on you yesterday. So, but that's Lee. But anyway, Lee, we appreciate you saying that very much. And that's one of the clients that Cheryl works with around the country. So my name's Jerry Eisenhower. These are some of our team members here: Cheryl Eisenhower, Brandy Biswell. What we try to do here at CVC Success Group is we try to put together a team of subject matter experts that can help you through any phase of your business, through marketing, through training, whatever it is. So if we can help you, reach out to us. All it takes is a conversation. We get to know each other. You're not going to pay a dime for that conversation. Cheryl's open to talking to you. Brandy's open to talking to you. Brandy works on retainer with some of our clients and works with them in ongoing work like that, and does a super job with office staff, organization, and I'm going to even add this, office problems sometimes, right, Brandy?
For sure, office problems.
Yeah. We actually have done interventions, shall we say, in our time. Okay. So that's some of the stuff that we work with here. So if we can help you out here, give us a call at CVC Success Group. And with that, we really appreciate you being here with us. And we'll see you on a future episode of the CVC Success Group Tips and Tactics. It's stopping. It's just spinning. So if you're still with us, I apologize because I hit the stop button and it ain't stopping yet. I'm ending the broadcast.